Were mesmerized today by an incredible drama playing out on live television.
Aircraft that inside of which is a 6-year-old boy.
I thought it's gonna be the worst day, but now the best day in my life.
Hey there, my name is Brooke and I enjoy researching strange occurrences, conspiracy theories, true crime, etc., and sharing my find it with like-minded and curious individuals. If you fit that description, feel free to hit the subscribe button down below and we can continue on this journey into insanity and craziness together. Without further ado, let's get started in today's video. Richard Allen Heene Jr. was born September 10th, 1961 in the state of Virginia. After completing high school, Richard tried a variety of jobs, including author, salesman, board game designer, scientist, dog poop picker-upper, you name it, he's probably done it. He worked primarily as a carpenter, repairing and remodeling buildings for customers. Those who knew him would describe him as very assertive and determined to succeed in whatever financial or social endeavor he was pursuing at the time. In the 70s, Heene decided to become a storm chaser after he was working on the roof of a building during construction and he witnessed it be ripped off by a tornado. The adrenaline rush of it all must have really had an effect on Richard because it wasn't long until he was riding his motorcycle into tornadoes and even allegedly flying a plane around the perimeter of Hurricane Wilma in 2005. Being the entrepreneurial man that Richard was, he decided to pursue an acting and stand-up comedy career in 1997. This would lead him to taking several acting classes at the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute in Hollywood, California. During one class, Richard would meet Mayumi Izuka. She was born on January 2nd, 1964 in Japan, and at the time she was playing the guitar for a rock band and running a small business out of her home, editing and producing demo reels for aspiring actors. After getting married only months later and failing to find success in their entertainment careers, the two would decide to move to Fort Collins, Colorado, and start a family. They would have 3 children, all boys, named Bradford, Rio, and Falcon, respectively. Even after becoming a father, Richard did not lose his eccentric personality. Instead of settling into a more relaxed lifestyle, as many would when becoming parents, Richard decided to involve his children in his strange and eccentric activities such as storm chasing and UFO hunting. In 2008, the family would try their luck at the entertainment industry again when they appeared on an episode of Wife Swap. The premise of this television series is to take 2 families from completely different lifestyles, social classes, and swap out the mothers/wives for 2 weeks. The first week, the mother must live by the rules of her new family and go along with whatever they say, regardless of how it goes against her beliefs or morals or just way of life. The second week, the wife is allowed to make her own rules and her new family must abide by them, which of course causes a lot of drama and chaos as families do not want to adapt to whatever this strange woman coming into their family has to say. At the end of the experiment, the 2 couples sit down and have a meeting, reflecting on their time during the 2-week experiment. Sometimes the couples will come to an agreement and admit that they learned something from their new families, but other times it will end in complete and utter mayhem and the couples will just begin fighting and disagreeing about their ways of life.
I'm like, how did
He's
I get
a
here?
man.
You're
He's
drunk.
a gentleman.
You're drunk. He's not a gentleman. He's a sap. You're a slut. You dress like a slut. You look like a slut. You know what? Don't do it. Don't.
In the Heene's episode, Mayumi would switch places with Karen Martell, wife of Jay Martell and the mother of 2 from Connecticut. The Martell's family of tranquility and safety was completely opposite from the Heene family. During the Heene family's intro to the show, the children could be seen getting pulled out of school to go storm chasing, and they even claimed to sleep in their clothes so that they would always be ready to go and catch a storm.
Everybody else, start approaching!
Put the socks and shoes on, we got to go.
The relationship between Mayumi and Richard really just seemed to have a lot of dated gender roles. Richard kind of just does whatever he wants, and Mayumi is expected to cook, clean, take care of the children, and basically do everything by herself. There's even a scene during the swap where Karen Martell quotes Richard saying that he believes that after 25, women just go downhill and aren't really good for anything. He's overall just extremely arrogant and full of himself, and he likes to yell and be very...
Go do that.
Okay, you're supposed to live the life of Mayumi. Mayumi doesn't jackhammer me. She doesn't go... Okay, here you go. Here's how I handle this. Hey, baby, come on in and get my jackhammer. You know...
kind of too much for me, but that's just my opinion. In the Martell residence, Mayumi feels that the family, and especially the children, are just very fearful of their surroundings, scared of being hurt, scared of the dangers in the world, and she's really scared for them and tries to teach them that it's okay to take risks. 2009 would be quite the year for the Heene family. In February 2009, Mayumi would be seen with a bruise on her cheek and blood vessels burst in her left eye. This would prompt a concerned loved one to notify police. A domestic violence investigation was launched, but without sufficient evidence, the charges were dropped. In 2009, the Heene family would appear in yet another wife swap episode for the 100th anniversary due to audience's popular demand. This time, Mayumi would switch places with Cherie Silver, who was allegedly a psychic medium from St. Augustine, Florida.
Being on wife swap with Richard was very challenging. He is definitely a very eccentric, aggressive, talented, creative person. Yes, he was definitely intense. He definitely had a temper.
During this episode, Richard would dive even deeper into his strange beliefs, saying that he believed humanity evolved from aliens and that he would launch his own homemade flying saucers into the storms that he chased. Knowing that Richard couldn't expect to keep his family's fame going by appearing on Wife Swap, he was really desperate to keep them in the spotlight and was just concocting ideas in his head of what he could do to stay relevant. He had a dream of creating his own television series about scientific mysteries, but no network picked up his idea or wanted to create this show. He pitched a reality show dedicated entirely to his family to the Learning Network, aka TLC, but they really had no interest in it. Finally, Lifetime, the owner of Wife Swap, agreed to begin producing a show about the Heene family. But the deal would be called off before it could come to fruition. Why would the series be called off, you ask? Well, let me tell you. As we know, Richard Heene was all about UFOs, science, storms, all of that. In 2009, Richard would create a prototype flying saucer balloon vehicle type thing, which was intended to hover above traffic. According to Richard, this vehicle was operated by turning on a high voltage timer, which would, quote, emit 1 million volts every 5 minutes for 1 minute, allowing it to move horizontally. The balloon was made with a mix of plastic tarps, duct tape, string, cardboard, plywood. Richard was quite the handyman, so he managed to make it happen. The balloon was filled with helium and estimated to have the capacity to lift 45 to 65 pounds, depending upon the altitude and the temperature at the time. On October 15th, 2009, at approximately 11 a.m., Richard would make a home video of his family launching this balloon into the atmosphere. With seemingly the entire family present, the family could be heard counting down from 3 before releasing the balloon into the air. As the balloon continued floating up, and up, Richard realized that the balloon was not tethered to the ground as he had intended, and he only wanted it to hover a few feet into the air, but it just kept going. The youngest child, 6-year-old Falcon, was nowhere to be seen in this video, but nobody really seems to notice or be concerned or make any comment about it in the video. However, the family later claimed that once they stopped filming, one of their other 2 children had allegedly seen 6-year-old Falcon climb into the balloon and I guess just decided not to say anything to their parents. The family then claimed to call the Federal Aviation Administration, but sheriffs would say that there was no proof that this call was ever made. They then called Denver news station KUSA TV and requested that news helicopters follow the balloon and find out where it was going. Finally, at 11:29 a.m., the family would then call 911. You know, believing that their 6-year-old child was in this balloon, floating thousands of miles in the air. Hey guys, Editing Brooke here. I totally promise that I have a concept of distance, and I meant to say feet. Anyways, let's keep going. But that was the last thing they decided to do.
The air.
He's in the air?
Yeah. He's only 6.
Is it just me, or is drawing government and local attention to your missing prototype balloon thing a bit of a red flag instead of, you know, maybe calling 911 to help get your missing child out of the skies? Is that a red flag, or is it just me? Helicopters were sent after the balloon while it traveled 60 miles over 2 counties. Planes that were scheduled to fly in the area had to be rerouted in efforts to not collide with it. Sheriff deputy near Platteville, Colorado, claimed to see an object falling from the balloon, and a photograph was taken. You could see a black dot falling underneath the balloon, and people were really concerned that it was 6-year-old Falcon who had fallen. News of the incident spread internationally, and Balloon Boy became the #1 most Googled topic that day. Internet users would immediately create a bunch of memes about the situation, even when the young boy's safety was uncertain. Saturday Night Live even created a skit where they interviewed the weather balloon. 2 hours later, the balloon would finally touch down 12 miles away from Denver International Airport at 1:35 p.m. When police reached the fallen balloon, it was empty. Falcon was nowhere to be found inside, and search and rescue teams were sent out. Seeing as the boy was believed to have traveled within a 60-mile radius, the cost of these search and rescue operations were extremely expensive. The helicopters alone that were sent out by the Colorado National Guard cost over $14,000. It's been estimated that the cost of the entire search totaled to be over $2 million. Finally, at 4:14 p.m., several news sources would state that Falcon was found hiding in a cardboard box in the family home's attic. As news of the boy's safety was confirmed, people around the world were really relieved that the boy was found safe. However, from the beginning, there were, of course, skeptics of the entire situation. Even without knowing the family's history of wanting to break into the entertainment industry, a lot of people questioned if this balloon would even be able to lift a 37-pound boy such as Falcon. Police didn't question the integrity of this entire Heene family situation until they began their press tour. During an interview on Larry King, Falcon would be asked by the interviewer why he didn't just come out of hiding once he realized that police were searching for him. Falcon looked to his parents and said, quote,
You guys said that we did this for the show.
The following day, Falcon and his parents would appear on 2 other national news sites giving interviews, and when asked about the situation, Falcon got extremely uncomfortable and even vomited. The boy's nervous behavior and odd statements on television began to make authorities very suspicious, and they decided to look further into the situation. After consulting a physics professor at Colorado State University, Larimer County Sheriff's Department ultimately determined that the balloon did not have the capacity to lift this boy off the ground and float 60 miles the way that it did. On October 28th of that year, County Sheriff Jim Alderton would state during a press release that the entire incident was a hoax and a publicity stunt created by the Heene family, particularly the 2 parents, because they're the adults in the situation, that concocted this situation in efforts to make their family more marketable so that they would be able to secure a spot on television with their own reality show. The following day, the Heene family lawyer would claim that as soon as charges were filed, the parents would turn themselves into police, but they would not admit to being guilty. Before sentencing, Richard and Mayumi had racked up quite the list of potential fines that they could be held responsible for. The FAA initially proposed an $11,000 fine for launching an unauthorized aircraft into federal airspace. Richard faced charges for a Class 4 felony, 2 to 6 years in prison, and fines between $2,000 and $500,000. Mayumi faced charges for a Class 3 misdemeanor, up to 6 months in prison, and a fine between $50 and $750. Mayumi eventually admitted that she had known Falcon's whereabouts the entire time and that the family had begun planning the hoax approximately 2 weeks before it occurred. Richard and Mayumi had instructed their children to lie to authorities and to the media in efforts to better their chances of getting on television permanently. Despite initially claiming that they would not plead guilty, Richard would plead guilty to attempting to influence a public servant, and Mayumi would plead guilty to false reporting to authorities on November 13th, 2009. On December 23rd, 2009, Richard would be sentenced to 90 days in jail, 100 hours of community service, and he was ordered to write a formal apology to all of those whose time he'd wasted searching for his son. He was also required to pay only $36,000 worth of restitution to those resources that he had wasted. Richard was also forbidden to profit off of the situation for several years following the hoax. He wasn't allowed allowed to write books, do paid interviews, anything like that. In January 2010, Richard began claiming in the media that the hoax wasn't a hoax after all, and that the couple had only pled guilty because Mayumi faced possible deportation due to her being a Japanese citizen. During an interview for 5280, Mayumi would claim that their original plan was to hide Falcon in the basement and find him before authorities could actually start calling out search and rescue operations. She claims that without informing anyone else in the family, Falcon decided to hide in the attic himself, which genuinely caused confusion and panic for the family. When journalists questioned Richard about this, he became extremely angry with Mayumi for admitting this. This would cause her to claim that this new story was made up and that she had only done it to save the reputation of the family. In July 2011, Richard Heene would auction off this balloon prototype that he had made, claiming that he would donate any proceeds made from the auction to the Tohoku natural disasters that were taking place that year. Mike Fruitman of Aurora, Colorado would purchase the balloon for $2,502. On December 23rd of 2020, Colorado Governor Richard Polis would pardon the couple, saying that they had paid their dues in the humiliation that they had undergone in the media, and they had served their time in jail. They paid their restitution, and he just felt that they deserved to have their records wiped clean so that this hoax didn't have to follow them for the rest of their lives. I vaguely remember hearing about this story in the media, but being that I was only 11 years old, I didn't really know the details of it, and it wasn't until I was researching this case for this video that I found out that the parents had been pardoned. On one hand, the parents, especially Richard, because he was doing a lot. He was doing way too much to be famous. They were just so consumed with the idea of becoming famous and being on television that they really didn't care at what expense that this entire thing would come to, especially when it comes to the mental health and the reputation of their young children who were just going along with what their parents told them they needed to do. Telling them to lie to police and the media on national television, I'm sure, put a ton of stress on them. I mean, it would anybody, but especially them being young children. And on the other hand, I realistically don't think that it matters if the two were pardoned, although I don't think they should have been. But I don't think it matters because it's not that hard to type up their names on Google and see all of the articles and videos, and the records of the internet are forever. After all, the parents did get the notoriety that they so badly wanted, albeit not the way that they had imagined, but I think if anything, the children are the ones who deserve the privacy that this pardon was supposed to grant the family, but unless they change their identities, I really don't see that happening. Some people online still debate if this entire situation was a hoax or not, but in my opinion, it very clearly was. Contacting the media before contacting 911, Falcon's strange statements and behavior on national television, and the parents going back and forth between saying it was a hoax and it wasn't are all giant red flags to me, which I think point towards the entire thing being fake. While both of the parents' behavior was extremely sus to me, Richard is just not the type of person I would want to be around, and it's a no from me. This man's behavior rubs me in all the wrong ways. I love to hear your thoughts about this crazy hoax, especially if you were old enough to remember all of the news and media going on back in 2009 about the situation. What do you believe to be the truth surrounding the hoax? Do you think the parents really did manufacture the whole thing? Do you think they originally had another plan and then Falcon, being the brilliant 6-year-old that he was, just decided to switch it up and go hide in the attic instead? Do you think that the parents' sentencing was appropriate? And do you think that after wasting all of the time and resources that people put into helping find their not really missing son, that they deserve to have their records wiped clean? That brings us to the end of the Balloon Boy hoax and the story of the Heene family. I appreciate you all watching, and I can't wait to read your thoughts and comments down below. Thanks for watching. Bye.